remarks. The first one is Kavita Agarwal, PharmD. She is from Verona Pharma.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, my name is Kavita Agarwal. I am the Senior Vice President of Medical Affairs at Verona. Verona is a single asset biotechnology company developing and commercializing its lead product, ensifentrine, for the maintenance treatment of COPD. As you all know, COPD is a heterogeneous lung condition characterized by chronic respiratory symptoms. In the United States and globally, COPD is a leading cause of morbidity and mortality, and its prevalence is expected to continue to increase. COPD is the third leading cause of death worldwide and sixth leading cause of death in the United States, where 6.5% of adults report a diagnosis of COPD. COPD is associated with a substantial symptom burden, particularly dyspnea, which affects quality of life and activities of daily living. In addition to symptoms, patients with COPD may experience exacerbations, which are associated with worsening symptoms, subsequent exacerbations, disease progression, increased healthcare utilization, hospitalization, worsening of comorbid conditions, and mortality. A greater number of exacerbations are associated with a greater FEV1 decline, and hospitalization for COPD exacerbations increases the risk of mortality. COPD imposes a substantial economic burden on the healthcare system, adding $33.5 billion of annual healthcare expenditure in 2020, a figure that is expected to reach $60.5 billion by 2029. Managing COPD is achieved through several modalities, including pharmacotherapy, where the primary goal is to reduce symptoms and exacerbations. In the United States, approximately 6.5 million patients are treated chronically. Strategies for patients that continue to experience symptoms include such as dyspnea, are generally limited to only escalating to a dual LABA/LAMA bronchodilator therapy, which does also include triple therapy. While dual and triple therapies are effective, patients remain significantly symptomatic despite maximum treatment, with persistent day-to-day symptoms in almost 50% of patients. Inhaled corticosteroid therapy targets inflammation and, in combination with bronchodilator therapy, improves lung function, reduces symptoms, and reduces the risk of exacerbations in patients who have elevated eosinophils. The benefit of ICS therapy is limited to patients who have elevated eosinophils, where the greatest benefit is observed in those with an eosinophil count of greater than 300. Additionally, ICS is associated with numerous adverse effects, including an increased risk of pneumonia, decreased bone density, poor diabetes control, and worsening of glaucoma, all of which pose substantial health issues for an older population. Despite the efficacy of current therapies, there is an unmet need for treatments that both adequately manage COPD. There's an unmet need for treatments that adequately manage COPD. Patients who are treated with standard of care still experience both exacerbations and symptoms that impact quality of life. Real-world studies demonstrate that 40 to 50% of patients still experience at least one moderate or severe exacerbation, highlighting the limitations of existing therapies and underscoring the need for new therapies that can better address patients' COPD. Verona is grateful for the opportunity to showcase ensifentrine as a potential new treatment option for patients with COPD who need more effective and convenient therapies. Ensifentrine is a novel first-in-class selective dual inhibitor of PDE3 and PDE4, which provides bronchodilation and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory action in one molecule and is complementary to mechanisms of actions of other therapies. Ensifentrine, if approved, is expected to be the first novel mechanism available for the maintenance treatment of COPD in more than 10 years. Ensifentrine is delivered via standard jet nebulizer, which is easy to use and consistently provides effective drug delivery to the lungs without the need for high inspiratory flow rates, as required for dry powdered inhalers, or complex hand-breath coordination as required by the use of pressurized metered dose inhalers. Studies indicate that up to 78% of COPD outpatients using a dry powder inhaler have suboptimal peak inspiratory flow rates, and most patients with COPD demonstrate errors in pressurized metered dose inhalers. Administration of the treatment via standard jet nebulizer may help to optimize medication delivery. In addition, In addition, delivery of ensifentrine via the nebulized route directly to the lungs can optimize the benefit-risk profile of pharmacological inhibition of PDE3 and PDE4 by minimizing systemic exposure and any associated potential undesired systemic effects. In the phase 3 trial program, ENHANCE-1 and ENHANCE-2, ensifentrine met the primary endpoint, demonstrating statistically significant improvements in lung function across both primary and secondary endpoints. In a pooled analysis of the enhanced data, ensifentrine provides statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvements in the primary endpoint of area under the curve over 12 hours in FEV1, with a placebo-corrected increase from baseline of 90 milliliters at week 12.
Dr. Agarwal,
Yeah.
We're going to need for you to wrap it up on like your results.
Sure. And then in terms of symptom measures, we did see improvements in ERS, TDI, SGRQ. With respect to, as we discussed with exacerbations, the study was not designed nor enriched for exacerbations, yet showed a 41% reduction in the pooled analysis. Ensifentrine was well tolerated with an adverse event rate similar to placebo. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to present here and for all the work of ICER, Midwest, CEPAC, patients, providers, and all the stakeholders who have participated in the review of ensifentrine, and appreciate the opportunity to provide comments as part of the review process.
Thank you. I see right now we already have one question. Dr. Rend.
Dr. Agarwal, thanks. As you may have heard in Dr. Whittington's presentation of her model and scenario analysis, it matters a fair bit whether we assume that there's improvement in quality of life, not just due to reduced exacerbations, but in day-to-day quality of life when people aren't having exacerbations. And it would be easy to imagine that an inhaler that's improving FEV1 might be doing that. We ended up not putting that in our base case because we didn't hear back from Verona whether we could get data showing what quality of life on non-exacerbation days looked like. Despite repeatedly asking, and I guess I'm wondering why not tell us that? So because it only could be to the benefit of ensifentrine if it's the case that it's improving daily quality of life.
Yes, and so as a small biotech company with a single asset, we have been extremely focused on preparing for the launch of the product. I think collecting some of the additional information just was going to be a time-consuming effort that we had to focus our attentions on preparing for the launch at this time.
I have a question. So does Verona have anything in a clinical trial planned that actually looks at today's background therapy, like the dual or the triple therapy?
At this time, we do not have any additional studies planned in the COPD patient population, simply as we are trying to wait for the FDA approval before we would make any further development plans.
Okay. One last question, really simple. How long does it take to nebulize, to do a treatment? This is a twice-a-day therapy, but how long does it take to deliver the milligrams for a dose?
In our clinical studies, it was an average of 7 minutes per dose delivered.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next commenter is Tanya Winders. She's the president and CEO of Global Allergy and Airways Patient Platform. Ms. Winders, go ahead. Well, I guess we can all read it, but we have asked that you disclose any of your conflicts of interest.
And you're muted, Ms. Winders.
I'm sorry, I thought she had unmuted me. Okay, how about now? Okay, so I am a paid advisor for unbranded disease awareness, education, and advocacy for AstraZeneca, Chiesi, GSK, Roche, MSD, and Sanofi Regeneron. And our organization, GAP, as 130 patient advocacy organizations, has received 25%, less than 25% of overall funds from these healthcare companies independently. So I'm beginning my formal comments now rather than my disclosure. Imagine being unable to walk to the mailbox without stopping to catch your breath. Imagine not attending your child's wedding or weekly gathering of church friends due to your dependence on oxygen. Imagine speaking to a lawmaker who has no clue that COPD is a lung disease or that it is a leading cause of death here in the United States. Unfortunately, this is the reality for more than 16 million Americans today. COPD is a chronic progressive disease that changes many lives forever. 10 years ago, my own mother began to demonstrate symptoms of shortness of breath and cough. She never smoked, had no occupational exposures, and did not live in a highly polluted area of the country. As the years went by, she dismissed her breathlessness as simply getting older and out of shape. After years of suffering and silence, she finally shared this with our family, and we began to encourage her to see a pulmonologist. It took almost 3 years for her to even get spirometry or that referral. And that is when she heard the word for the first time, COPD. She was soon put on more aggressive treatments and thankfully has maintained control of her disease most days. She has been hospitalized only one time, but limits her activities and her interactions with others as a necessary means to simply staying well. She struggles with anxiety and depression due to the shortness of breath and the isolation and daily limitations of COPD. I wish her story was rare, however, it is not. Now let me introduce you to my dear friend, Ms. Carolee, who is living with advanced COPD and is oxygen dependent. She no longer can travel, spend time with her church friends, or even do her basic daily life like grocery shopping. She has been hospitalized 2 to 3 times each year and now has a full-time caregiver living in her home. She experienced several cardiovascular events post-exacerbation, resulting in longer hospital stays and even more complicated recoveries. Yes, she did smoke for about 20 years of her life, but has been smoke-free for over 40. Yet she still struggles with the shame and guilt of this disease. She cannot afford her medication and often has to make the decision between paying the rent, eating, or breathing, a choice that no one should ever have to make. Despite the availability of good treatments, many patients remain symptomatic and need new options. While COPD-specific quality of life instruments exist, these tools are designed to focus on physical symptoms and limitations. They do not fully address the psychosocial aspects that affect a person's ability to engage in meaningful life activities. They also fail to recognize the burden of the caregivers as this disease progresses. Each year, COPD directly costs our society more than $24 billion. When you consider indirect costs, the total is more than $49 billion per year. Among patients who are employed, COPD often leads to substantial income losses, estimated at over $7,000 due to missed work. Moreover, approximately 40% of patients are forced into premature retiring, resulting in lifetime income losses of more than $300,000. Today, there is limited data on the absenteeism, presenteeism, or impact on physical, mental, emotional, financial, social, and sexual health of patients and caregivers. The health risks associated with exacerbations are significant, with patients facing an almost 4-fold increase in the risk of cardiovascular events, such as heart attack or stroke, within 30 days of exacerbation. Experiencing 2 or more exacerbations can increase a person's risk of future exacerbation by 61%. And in fact, up to 20% of patients require at least 1 hospitalization each year, and COPD hospitalizations do increase mortality risk, as you have heard. The annual economic impact associated with COPD is expected to rise to almost $5 trillion globally by 2030. The high unmet need for patients for COPD is evident, and it is imperative that during value assessments like today, we acknowledge the full spectrum of COPD's impact, from the direct cost of medical care to the indirect costs borne by patients and their families. As you consider the future healthcare policy and resource allocation to COPD, access to this new drug class with a novel mechanism of action, we hope that it will provide hope and health for people living with COPD that are not adequately managed with current treatments available. The quality of life for families like my own and Ms. Carolee's and millions of more depend on it. We need more options. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Winders. we appreciate both of you being here to deliver these public comments and helping us gain more insight. Anybody from the Midwest CPAC have any questions or comments, or ICER have any questions or comments for these two ladies? Okay, well, we may end up at lunch a little sooner. Steve or Sarah?